I'm Carmen Navarro, professor at the Department of Political Science of the University Autonomous of Madrid, and member of the Institute of Local Government at that university. Within the framework of sharing knowledge and initiative of the UDITE organization, my presentation will be on types of local government in Europe. I try to offer some thoughts and variables in order to understand differences between different local governments in different European countries, so that we can have ideas on why and how the functioning of these governments varies. For identifying differences, we in political science use typologies. Typologies allows us to divide countries into different types and different ways of functioning. To explain differences among functioning of political systems, we in political science use typologies. Typologies allow us grouping countries in different types. There have been several attempts in European studies of creating and elaborating typologies, types, forms of local government. In this presentation, I will explore three of them, three of the more used and the more commonly applied typologies. These three typologies are Page and Goldsmith's typologies from the late 80s. These authors divide between Northern European local government and Southern European local government. In the early 90s, Hesse and Sharp built another typology, our second typology. They group countries in three types: Franco group, Anglo group, and Middle and Central European group. Later on, in the beginning of the 21st century, Moritzen and Svara built another typology. This typology groups countries into four categories: the strong major form, the committee leader form, the collective form, and the council manager form. The criteria for the division in this typology, or in other words, the dimensions used to group or to organize differences among countries, can be of two types. The first two typologies use the vertical dimension of power as the axis for the division. They organize countries depending on how the relationship between local governments and upper levels of authorities, central government, are established. The third of our typologies use a second criteria or second dimension for dividing countries. This is the dimension of horizontal power. They establish differences depending on how power is distributed horizontally within city halls between different political actors, meaning mayor, council, councillors, and top administrators. First, Page and Goldsmith. These authors in the late 80s, they looked at European countries and they saw differences in two types of ways of governing or ways of governance. Differences in first, the capacities, the competencies of functions local governments had, and second, the relation and access of local authorities to central authorities. So what they identified were two models or two systems: Southern European countries, low level of competences, functions, and tasks, but high level of access to central authorities. Local politicians express their demands and needs to upper levels of government, trying to get resources and services to their localities. They represent identity, they represent their communities and are very active in communicating with central authorities. Second, Northern European countries, where we see the two opposite traits, the two opposite characteristics. First, local governments have important tasks, functions, competencies. They are providers of the welfare state, and they do not have access to upper levels of government, to higher authorities, because they have autonomy enough to provide services and to deal with issues and matters of local life. We don't have time in this occasion to develop on why this is so, these differences, and what is the origin. It is very interesting to go deeper on that, but it's obvious that it has historic reasons, and basically the way in which, when the building of nation state, the way in which nation states establish relations with local communities, with localities, it is this way, the dynamic they created at the time, or the logic of this relation, which explains what the differences are between the North and the South. Second typology, some years later, early 90s, we have two authors, Hesse and Sharp, trying to improve the previous typology, which was considered to be quite general. They tried to improve it and complete it, but the logic is the same. Instead of two groups, North and South, they identified three groups. And in addition to the two variables that we had before, which means degree of task or functions and relations or access to upper level of governments, Hesse and Sharp add a third variable, and this variable is how the constitutional status of local autonomy is recognized. So, using these three variables, these authors grouped countries, European countries, in three systems or three types: the Franco group, the Anglo group, and the Northern and Middle European group. What are the characteristics of each of these groups? Well, the Franco group, in which we find countries such as France, Spain, Greece, Belgium, or Portugal and Italy, we find constitutional recognition of local status. We find that local politicians represent local identity, and we find a type of colonization, so-called colonization of central government, which means that local politicians are actually present in or very well connected with upper levels of government through different vias, such as sharing appointments, the cumul de mandat in the French case, or having very active channels of communication via party lines. In the Anglo group, we find a different situation. They have no constitutional recognition, local governments, but they do have many functions. They provide many services for citizens in local life, and they have a quite high degree of autonomy for acting and developing their own public policies or services. In the third case, the North and Middle European countries, we find constitutional recognition and both local autonomy and high degree of development of services and development of public policies. This typology contributed to complement the previous one, but there is a shortage or a lack of information in these two typologies, as you can probably see, which is that they are built in times in which many of European countries, mainly Eastern European countries, are not included. There have been some attempts of including these Eastern European countries, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, in typologies, and building and merging these two typologies in an attempt of including also new countries. Heinelt and Heplas try to create an index of political and financial autonomy. And in the table that can be seen in this presentation, Heplas and Heinelt propose us to look at different items which could measure political and financial autonomy, such as budget of local autonomies as a percentage of the GDP, or financial autonomy of municipalities, and ranking in these three items, ranking countries between 0 and 2, 0 being the lowest level of autonomy and 2 being the highest level of autonomy. We can see the list of countries in this table, in which we identify Southern European countries at the top of the table, indicating low political and financial autonomy, and Scandinavian countries, but together with other countries at the bottom of the table with high degree or higher degree of financial and local autonomy. In our third typology, the Moritzen and Svara typology of 2002, we worked with the horizontal dimension of power. This typology is quite interesting, quite insightful, because it looks at political power as a function of the degree of control a political actor, individual or collective, has over two arenas, the legislative arena and the executive arena. According to all these elements, there would be 4 types of government. The strong mayor form is a case in which the elected mayor controls the majority of the city council and is legally and actually in full charge of all executive functions. France, in Germany some lenders, Austria, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Poland, Portugal, and Spain are examples of this model. The committee leader form is a case in which one person is clearly the political leader of the municipality, name or not mayor. He or she may or may not control the council, executive powers are shared, and the political leader develops some executive tasks, but others are responsibility of collective bodies. Denmark, Sweden, and some English cases belong to this group. In the collective form, a collegiate body, the executive committee, is the center of the decisions and responsible for all executive functions. The executive committee consists of elective officials, councillors, chaired by the mayor. Belgium, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and some English and German cases fall in this category. Finally, in the council manager form, all the executive functions are in charge of a CEO, the city manager, appointed by the city council, which has only general authority over policy, and administrative matters are responsibility of the manager. A mayor who has only ceremonial functions chairs the council, And Ireland is the case in this category, but also is a type that we can also find in other places in the world, not only in Europe, in countries such as the United States. Different types of governments and typologies reflect not only how power is shared vertically or horizontally, but also it has very strong explanatory power to interpret other events or other elements of local political life. Different types are related in the literature, and there are many empirical works on that. Types are related with recruitment patterns of the local political actors, with visions of democracy, with attitudes towards reforms, or with levels of professionalization of political elites. In summary, local governments in Europe are different. Each local government is different from the other, but it is true too that they can be grouped in types, they can be organized in typologies. Typologies give us very interesting clues to interpreting and explaining the way they are actually functioning. Thank you very much.